Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, March 24th, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Hi, I've had some of your viewers accuse me of being abusive. Stop abusing Nima. I go, I think it was a father-son relationship. I'm more like to
Exactly.
be his dad.
Exactly.
I'll write you out of the will.
Larry, let's get started with
Yes.
Pete Hegseth and the way that he was talking on Fox News. He was talking about the conflict between the United States and Iran and the way that they're seeing the situation.
It has to. And that's what President Trump is committed to. He has said very clearly, as you stated, unambiguously, Iran will not get a nuclear bomb under a Trump administration. Unacceptable, full stop, very clear. He said it, he'll keep saying it. Now, as we see with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, there's only one man on the planet, and this is true, this is not hyperbole, one man on the planet who could bring them to the table and forge a lasting peace. And he's doing that right now. We're in the process of doing that. That is unique to Donald Trump because he's strategically unpredictable, he's strong, he's clear, and he's respected on the world stage. I think the same is true in Iran. We know the double talk of the Ayatollahs. You know it. You lay it out. I understand it. There have been secret, duplicitous moves for years and years and years. But we are at a moment under this administration where President Trump is giving them an offer. He is saying, now is your chance to come to the table and completely give up and dismantle your program. Let's talk. I'd prefer to talk rather than do anything else. At the same time, he is ensuring that at the Defense Department and across our military, we maintain all capabilities necessary to work with our partners to, if we have to, and we don't want to, but if we have to, prevent Iran from gaining nuclear capabilities. So he's clear. The position is clear. Iran understands their options. There's never been a more serious leader atop the United States of America. There's a very serious leader atop the state of Israel. There's a clear message that Iran cannot get a nuclear bomb, and we are prepared to enforce it. But we would much prefer that it be done at the table for the betterment of the Iranian people and for the betterment of peace. So we hope that's a possibility, but we understand the complication.
Yeah. Your take, Larry.
That clip right there illustrates why Pete Hegseth should never have been confirmed as Secretary of Defense. He's an intellectual lightweight. He's shallow. He's ignorant. He understands none of the history of the region. He understands none of the history of Donald Trump with respect to Iran. There was a deal in place to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. It was called JCPOA. Who walked away from that? Donald Trump, not the Iranians. The Iranians have had, the Ayatollah Khamenei issued a fatwa going back, I think, to 2003, 2004, that explicitly stated that it was against the tenets of Islam for Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon, an atomic bomb, that it was haram. So, and in fact, I raised that with another person who, he considers himself, up to date on foreign policy and those kinds of issues. And he goes, really? They said that? Yeah, they said that. So that's not even widely known in the United States. I guarantee you Hegseth doesn't know that. This entire thing about saying, we're going to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, it's a red herring. It's a distraction. The Trump administration has bought into the lies of the Zionists. And, we've now got a clear history of dealing with Israel. Israel is a toxic, malevolent, evil regime, in my view. And I hope that doesn't get you canceled. But the history of whether it's Israel's role in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Israel's role in the attack on the USS Liberty, Israel's cynical support, financial support for Hamas, then to create helping create Hamas by sustaining their operations, and then all of a sudden to make ending and eliminating Hamas the central part of their policy. It is Israel's had its hooks into American society since 1960, and Pete Hegseth is one of those marionettes attached to the hand of the AIPAC puppet master, and he just dances to their tune. So the notion that Trump is respected, Russia's trying to be nice to Trump, but they recognize Trump's history. Trump was supplying offensive weapons to Ukraine. Trump walked away from the intermediate nuclear missile agreement back in 2018, the INF Treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement. So Trump hasn't done anything to establish his credibility with his people. If anything, he's seen it almost as mercurial, unreliable, emotional, reacts. Doesn't appear to clean, a clear strategy in mind. So this kind of bombast from someone like Hegseth, it's going to potentially wind up get a bunch of Americans killed, in my view.
By the way, they're doing the same, Larry, in Syria. I don't know if you saw the interview of Witkoff. He was talking about the new Syrian government says they have changed. They're not those old.
Yeah. Yeah. No. In fact, you obviously, and bad. I'm going to put down some black marks on your record here. You didn't read my article on it. I wrote about the Witkoff interview in detail at sonar21.com. Put in a plug. Come read it. Witkoff demonstrated a surprising level of ignorance. And, one of the comments that he made was with respect to Syria, where, oh, man, we're not the same people. You told Tucker, you and I aren't the same people we were 30 years ago. Yeah, but we're not talking about Jelani from 30 years ago. We're talking about him from a year ago when they're cutting off heads. And now, even now, with him heading up this government, and he's got a new name, Al-Sharam, something like that. They're killing Christians, Alawites, and Shia. They're cutting their heads off. They're murdering entire families. So just because the man's got a new suit, just because he trimmed his beard and got a haircut, doesn't mean that he had a change of heart and suddenly became, Mahatma Gandhi, for God's sake. And that was what's so shocking about Witkoff. Yeah, that Bashar al-Assad, man, he was a bad man. He protected Christians. He protected Alawite. He protected Shia. He even protected Jews. He fought against these Islamic extremists who happened to be Sunni, many of whom happen to have been financed by the West, the United States in particular. So it's just, Witkoff comes off as a very nice, genial man, seems well-intentioned. And I'm sure he knows the real estate market in and out. But he's just flat out ignorant about the Middle East. He sees everything completely through the Zionist lens. Does not understand. In fact, I don't even think he understands the difference between Shia and Sunni. Maybe that bad. But he admitted in the course of that interview with Tucker, I haven't talked to Hamas. I haven't dealt with them directly. And yet, when he's talking about Russia, we need to have communication. Both sides, we need to talk. Well, dude, which is it? Either you're going to engage and talk to the other side or you're not. And so it underscores, if you will, almost the schizophrenic nature of Trump's policy. He is completely beholden. A few 3-4 weeks ago, I was probably saying, well, maybe he's not. Maybe because he doesn't have to be reelected, he's going to take a more middle of the road approach. No, I was wrong. He is fully in the pocket of the Zionists. They're pulling the strings. He's the monkey with the organ grinder. Organ grinder cranks the tune. Trump dances the dance.
Larry, he said something about the babies and the atrocities on October 7th, and he was watching he said that someone
he said
Israeli
rape.
commander showed him. Yeah.
Well, he said rapes and the beheading of the Israeli soldier. I was waiting for him to say the babies. He didn't say the babies. So let's, I don't want someone to accuse you of being inaccurate, because you're always on top of your game.
Yeah. But we heard from Chuck Schumer. He said this.
Bad until 2017, and until October 7th last year.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
When the Jews were attacked
when the
by
Jews
Hamas.
were attacked by Hamas initially, and the women raped, and the little babies' heads chopped off, and all of that brutally, and all of a sudden, anti-Semitism developed.
Yeah. Larry, one of the points that they're making, it's Chuck Schumer. It's not an ordinary guy talking about what has happened on October 7th. He's the head of the Democratic Party. We can say that he's so important when it comes to the Democratic Party, and he pictures the conflict this way. And we see Witkoff on his part, as you mentioned. He mentioned that he saw some, I don't know, raping. He said what he exactly said.
Oh, he said, the women were raped. Watch this video. The Israelis, let's call them the Zionists, they've made this propaganda video, and they claim that it shows all these Israeli women being raped. It's the old story of, like, in the United States, they used to have this meme of black men raping white women, and so this is a variant of that racist trope that, these hairy Arabs are raping these pure Israeli virgins. It didn't happen. It's a lie. It's a fabrication. But did they saw off the head of one Israeli soldier? I think so. But again, they were attacking soldiers, guys with weapons. That's not terrorism. That's war. A lot of the women that were captured were Israeli soldiers. They weren't, barmaids at a rock festival. But the truth doesn't matter. It has now gotten to the point that if you dare to criticize Israel and its conduct, you're guilty of anti-Semitism. And yet, the irony of that is, when you're speaking out on behalf of the Palestinian people, they are Semites. So you're being pro-Semitic, not anti-Semitic. You're being pro-Semitic. You're just basically criticizing one cousin for attacking another. That's what's going on here. The Israelis don't want to admit that, but genetically, culturally, they're cousins of the Palestinians. They're not strangers. The Palestinians are not aliens who were dropped off here by Martians cruising the universe. They all trace back to Father Abraham. It means they're cousins, they're family members. But what's going on right now since October 7th, and AIPAC just really ramped up its propaganda campaign in the United States. The political establishment, which is financially beholden to these people, they've succeeded in creating this meme that anybody that speaks out against Israel and its genocidal policies is anti-Semitic. Why do you hate the Jew? This has nothing to do with being Jewish. This has everything to do with being these Zionist crazies who believe that they're the only human beings allowed to live. And when you protest that, all of a sudden you're an anti-Semite.
How, Larry, one of the points that Witkoff mentioned is that he's talking to Hamas through Qataris. And it's so amazing why he didn't try to talk with them directly, because you don't need someone in the middle to negotiate with, to talk with. What do they need to do that?
Well, you know why. If they talk to them directly, they're acknowledging that they're human beings. They're acknowledging that they're people. They're acknowledging that they're legitimate. You know, this is a deliberate strategy on the part of the United States. And look at the one guy that the United States put in to negotiate who talked directly to Hamas and actually had some nice things to say about the people he was talking to. What'd they do to him? Boom, fired, gone. You can't humanize these people. If you show these as human beings, all of a sudden you can't justify murdering them and killing their children. As long as you treat them like insects that can be squashed like a bug, hey, no big deal. But my God, if you're talking to them, if you're dealing with them directly, all of a sudden you see that they are human beings with the soul, the same soul that God put in everybody. Can't have that.
Larry, do you see the attack on Yemenis as part of this pressure campaign on Iran, and the main goal would be Iran?
Yeah, no, this is attacking Yemen is just a stepping stone to go after Iran. Is to lay the predicate. You know, they reportedly have targeted and killed some of the Houthi leadership, and this reflects. It's almost like the United States is embracing Israel's wrong-headed strategy: kill the leaders, decapitate the top. Well, what we've learned through history is when you take off the senior leadership, what tends to arise after that is more radical, more intent on this. You know, when you look at, let's take the case of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, until he was murdered. He was not a fire-breathing radical urging his followers to go out immediately, strap on suicide vests, and kill the Israelis. In fact, he was murdered while meeting to discuss an actual ceasefire to bring an end to the conflict. So, if they're taking out Houthi leadership, man, God help Israel and the United States, because the folks who take over may not be inclined to hold back or show restraint. I still think there's a genuine risk of a U.S. aircraft carrier getting sunk there in the Red Sea. If that happens, that's going to be a game changer, because all of a sudden the United States is going to be caught with the fact that, hey, we're not invincible. Number one. Number two, though, the U.S. officials are accepting assumptions about the Houthis, about the Iranians, that are false. They believe, for example, that Iran has no air defense, that it's stripped naked, it's bare, that the United States can just waltz in with an F-35 and drop bombs and destroy things. And all we have to do is a day of bombing and Iran's nuclear program is gone. Except, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and has made it clear that it is against its religious beliefs. But hey, facts don't matter. It's all about emotion. But when you have that assumption that, hey, it's like if you're a burglar and you say, man, that house, it looks vacant. There's nobody in there. Yeah, we're going to go in and take it. And you break in and all of a sudden you find it's occupied. The people inside got guns. You get shot. I think that's what's going to happen to the United States. And if it plays out this way, that the United States with Israel launches a massive attack on Iran, fully expecting to waltz in and hit whatever target, but in fact are met with a robust, stiff air defense and electronic warfare capability, that U.S. aircraft are shot down, pilots are taken hostage, and then Iran retaliates by hitting U.S. military facilities with hypersonic ballistic missiles, as well as and hitting Israel. It's going to change the world. It will be a game changer, potentially throwing us into a global conflict that will bring in Russia and China as well to help defend Iran. It's very dangerous. And Trump, in his arrogance and hubris, is playing with fire.
Larry, if Yemenis sink an aircraft carrier, do you think that would how would that influence the response from the United States? Are they going to double down? Are they going to go? Is Israel going to achieve what they wanted to achieve with the case of Iran?
Well, it would. I think the United States would be inclined to double down. Again, they're going to run into a problem, though. So the missiles, each of these carrier strike groups have at least 2 destroyers and 1 cruiser. And on board each of those destroyers is a vertical launch system of the Aegis missile class. And basically it's a tube in the deck of the ship. 96 of them, though, row after row. And when they fire those, the system doesn't have a way to automatically reload. And the missiles that they are firing there's a limited number. My understanding is right now there's less than 600 total. So if the United States starts using those, it's gonna, it could run out very quickly. So this is where that would be a limitation on Trump saying, "Oh, you sunk our carrier, boy, by God, we're gonna let you have it." They come back in with another aircraft carrier and a group of destroyers, and they get sunk. Or they say, "Okay, we're going to go punish Iran. We'll teach Iran a lesson." Again, the U.S. Navy has limited firepower. Simply, it's constrained because we don't have the supply chain is not robust enough to crank out new missiles, for example, that can be readily resupplied. So this is the Trump team is operating on bad information, and you try to tell them that, they don't want to listen. Oh, we know what we're doing. The arrogance is what's going to get them into trouble. Absolutely no humility. They think they can kill their way out of this. And, they're not willing to recognize the other political dimensions that are involved.
Here is Witkoff talking about the letter that the Trump administration sent to Iran.
That all said, he wrote that letter. And why did he write that letter?
For people who aren't aware of the letter, can you just roughly describe what it said?
It roughly said, "I'm a president of peace. That's what I want. There's no reason for us to do this militarily. We should talk. We should clear up the misconceptions. We should create a verification program so that nobody worries about weaponization of your nuclear material. And I'd like to get us to that place because the alternative is not a very good alternative." That's a rough encapsulation of what was said, roughly. And the president has said that. He's said that, so I'm not telling you anything's top secret or anything of that sort. The Iranians have reached back out. And I'm not at liberty to talk about the specifics, but clearly through back channels, through multiple countries and multiple conduits, they've reached back out. I think that it has a real possibility of being solved diplomatically, not because I've talked to anybody in Iran, but just because I think logically it makes sense that it ought to be solved diplomatically. It should be. I think the president has acknowledged that that he's open to an opportunity to clean it all up with Iran, where they come back to the world and be a great nation once again.
Yeah. Who walked away from the JCPOA? They had a process, a mechanism in place to verify that Iran was not building or working on creating material to build a nuclear weapon. That was called the JCPOA. Who walked away from that? Trump. Now Trump's coming back in, but what Witkoff's not saying, the other parts of this is, the key part that for the deal that the United States is insisting on is Iran has to abandon and deny any future support to Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And, frankly, the United States has been involved with carrying out a variety of covert actions against Iran for, good God, now 46 years, going back to 1979. And that we've had no compunction about arming groups, dealing with the folks in Baluchistan over in the eastern part of Iran to try to subvert and destabilize Iran. Well, the Iranians, they would like to they'd like to have a deal. They'd like Trump to come back and do what, the United States promised to do initially in JCPOA. But walked away from it. This entire policy is about protecting Israel. That's what this is about. And Israel ultimately, I would argue, has the veto power over what the U.S. does. Let me just put it this way. The last president to oppose Israel controlling U.S. foreign policy was a fellow named John Fitzgerald Kennedy. What happened to him?
What did you learn from the new documents that have been released? Just
that Israel, the Mossad, was directly involved in killing John F. Kennedy. That's what's come out of this. For example, for years, James Jesus Angleton, the head of counterintelligence at CIA, denied, we had no knowledge of Oswald. No, there wasn't any involvement. Well, now we find out he was actively working with Mossad to subvert John F. Kennedy's efforts to prevent Israel from getting a nuclear weapon. It's in the documents, to the point that he was dealing with them under the table and, if you will, off the books. Well, there's no surprise that after he died, the Israeli intelligence and military community held a memorial service for James Jesus Angleton. They named a forest in Israel for him, and they put up a plaque for him. So what's come out in these documents confirms there's a great book. Your listeners and viewers need to get it. It's called Final Judgment, written by Michael Collins Piper. It was written 20 years ago. There have been updates since. But what he lays out is not a theory. He lays out the evidence showing that Mossad was working closely with the CIA and with organized crime. Remember, we like to think of the mafia as being simply Italian, but there was a fellow by the name of Meyer Lansky, Jewish, who was sort of at the top of that controlling pyramid of the mafia activities that included the Trafficantes, the Giacanas. And what Michael Collins Piper presents in his book is irrefutable evidence of a conspiracy, an actual conspiracy that involved the CIA, the Israelis, and the Italian mob. And Israel's involvement was because the Kennedys were trying to force Israel to register AIPAC before it was AIPAC under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It was trying to curtail Israeli political influence in the United States, and was really going full bore to prevent Israel from getting a nuclear weapon. The latest release of documents shows that, in fact, Angleton was actively involved in helping Israel get those nuclear weapons. The other thing we now learn is that in the late 1950s, James Jesus Angleton set up a program called Operation Redcap. Operation Redcap was designed to recruit young soldiers, young military personnel, and to get them to defect to Russia in hopes that Russian intelligence, whether it was military intelligence, the GRU, or the KGB, would pick them up, maybe recruit them, start using them, so that the United States could, in effect, infiltrate Russian intelligence and military service. Guess who one of those young men was that joined that program? If you guessed Lee Harvey Oswald, you'd be correct. And that's why Oswald went to the Soviet Union in 1959. I think it was like September of 59, and returned to the United States in June of 1962. So Oswald was known to James Jesus Angleton, and he was, I believe, used as part of to create a legend for diverting attention from those who really carried out the murder of Kennedy, to become, as he said, he was a patsy. He was a setup guy, fall guy, because they could point to him and say, see, the Soviets were behind this, or the Cubans. It was all part of a elaborately staged CIA operation, but it also involved the Israelis. So that's that has vindicated many people who were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Now they've actually got documentary evidence to support that.
Larry, do you think that Lyndon Johnson was part of it? He knew about it, or he later on he learned about it?
He definitely has connections here. His mistress was Jewish woman with ties to Mossad. Gee, what a coincidence. He came prepared to be sworn in. He had the oath of office in his coat pocket that day. He was ready to be sworn in. So I think he knew it was going to take place. He was seen by the Israelis as not just seen, he proved to be a tool of Israel. He was the first president in the United States to be completely in the pocket of the Zionists, because he then is under his administration that he started the flow of weapons to Israel, big time. And it was something that Kennedy had resisted. So, yeah, Johnson's complicit in this.
Larry, I've seen that you on your website, you're just analyzing the moment that Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
And what was the point of doing that?
Well, one of the distractions has been that the claim that Kennedy, the fatal head wound, came from the front, and that the guys doctors who did the autopsy claimed the back of his head was blown off. Well, the autopsy photos posted online show clearly from this part of his head, the flap is laying open. Imagine like your head opens up like a car door on the right side of your car. Well, that doesn't. They fabricated that photo. Well, that's why I show the Zapruder film. And in the Zapruder, if you slow it down as slow as possible, you can see that Kennedy's head, and then the explosion comes out the front, head goes back. Well, that explosion of brain mass and blood coming out is just like what you get when a jet engine cranks off and the fire is shooting out. Yeah, it shoved his head back. The head didn't get shoved back because it got shot in the head. It got shot from behind. Now, and people say, oh, so you're just going with the lone gunman theory. No, I don't think Oswald made that shot. Somebody else was behind John F. Kennedy that made that shot. And it wasn't what we call a full metal jacketed bullet or a cartridge. So the bullet itself was, not full metal jacket, because they never found or recovered that bullet. And if it had gone through the head the way it did, it probably should have hit Conley or been, near Conley, who was the governor of Texas at the time, sitting in front of Kennedy. I put the sequence of photos where you can see Kennedy's head forward, then it blows out, and as it blows out, the head goes back, and that's all in really less than a second. Those, I've got 5 photos, but those are just fractions, very within this 1 second frame. It was just to further remind people that this notion that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman it's nonsense.
Larry, do you think that they're now much more powerful than they were in those days, or?
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. A lot more money, a lot more influence. I mean, we've now got to the place in the United States where if you speak out against Israel for what it's done for the murder of Palestinians, you're accused of being an anti-Semite. To protest Israel's you cannot protest Israel's policies without being labeled Jew hater. And that is so ludicrous when you've got so many prominent Jewish Americans, whether, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, you've got Jeffrey Sachs, who are speaking out in opposition to Israel's bloody slaughter, massacre of Palestinian people. Accuse them of being anti-Semitic. I mean, come on, it's just it's the ultimate ad hominem attack. Instead of dealing with the substance, they just prefer to put a label on you and try to dismiss you as crazy.
Now we're getting back to the point of the day earlier, I was talking with Marandi, Professor Marandi. He mentioned, I said, what is the basic issue with the United States when it comes to the negotiations between Iran and the United States? He said, what's going on? The main issue is what's going on right now with the ceasefire between Palestinians and Israelis. They don't get along with the negotiation, with the articles that they mention in any sort of agreement. They just want to renegotiate, change it, and the way they want it. This is, as you've mentioned, JCPOA, Donald Trump, in those days said, I don't agree with this sort of agreement. I want to do it by myself. And how do you think that there is still the main concern? Do you think that this concern can be understood on the part of the United States, or they're not that much involved and they don't want to get involved in the way that the Iranians are thinking about the negotiations?
Well, number one, Witkoff, let's go back to Witkoff. He's not talking to Hamas. And the U.S. position vis-a-vis Iran is that Iran has to disarm. Hamas has to disarm. Everybody's got to disarm except Israel. Israel's the only one that gets to have a nuclear weapon. Israel's the only one that gets to have an organized army. And, Iran's saying, hey, now we would like to reach some normal relationship with the United States. and sanctions lifted, but not at the price of sacrificing our sovereignty and who we can talk to and who we can support. This is not about an Islamic movement to implement Sharia law in terms of Iran's support for Hamas in Gaza. This really is about, it's a national liberation movement. The Palestinians are reacting much the same way that people throughout history around the world have reacted to colonial masters. They rise up, they fight back, and they use violence in the process. I'm not saying that necessarily the use of violence is a good thing, but it's why it happens. And the United States is in no mind, they're not going to recognize or acknowledge or accept that. We're the only ones that get to use violence. We're the only ones that get to go kill people. We're the only ones that get to overthrow governments. We're the only ones. And God forbid that some other country wants to be in that position. So this is, I think Witkoff is overly optimistic because the terms that the United States will require of Iran will not accept. And one of those key terms is complete suspension of aid to Hamas and Hezbollah.
When you said that, I remember the way that Joe Biden was talking about Putin when this conflict in Ukraine started. This man cannot be in power.
Yeah. Well, that's not, the United States has gotten so accustomed to overthrowing other leaders, taking them out. That day, it's just, getting our way, we're going to get rid of you. Well, everyone's getting on, they're wise to that game. They're going, okay, wait a second. You're a threat. And we're not going to put up with this anymore. So, if the United States, that's why I say that I think, I want to come back to when we started with Pete Hegseth and showing his comments. A mature Secretary of Defense would go into Donald Trump and say, Mr. President, I understand what you want to accomplish, why you want to make the orders that you are. But you need to understand that, one, we have a limited number of those missiles. And if we put our ships out there in the Persian Gulf, they're going to, if the Houthis, who are quite capable of doing so, if they fire 50 missiles at us, we're going to probably use up close to 200 of our missiles. And a lot of those missiles and drones that the Houthis are firing cost maybe $5,000, but our missiles cost $1 million, $2 million. And to make matters worse, Mr. President, the manufacturer of it can't keep pace. So we start off with less than 600 of these. And in a week of attacks, I said if they fire a total of 50 drones and missiles and we have to try to take them down, that 600 is going to go to 400. And if we did that another week, that 400 go to 200. And all of a sudden, we've used up 1/3, 2/3 of our supply. So we need to step back and figure out what kind of fight, if this turns south and we have to get into a fight, are we capable of raging that fight? But, Hegseth's not smart enough to think that way, talk that way, or provide that kind of information. And Trump is, he's almost got like a video game mentality. He thinks he's got all these extra lives he can add in and bonus points. But he doesn't.
Yeah. Let's talk about the positive part of the Trump administration, which that part that is involved in the conflict in Ukraine. Here is what Witkoff said, Larry, in terms of the conflict in Ukraine.
I think he's speaking to realistic, clear-eyed people who can, who have the welfare of Ukraine in mind.
So without getting into names,
Yeah.
I've talked to multiple European leaders, and I've said to them, the more you encourage him not to be proactive at the peace table. The more you suggest that aid will continue without any conditions attached to it. No one says that we shouldn't aid Ukraine today or in the reconstruction later on. But it's got to come with certain conditions. If we're going to give a lot of money to Ukraine, we want to hear the business plan of how this is going to get resolved, because it's an unsustainable business plan if they don't have a plan for how it gets resolved. We just can't forever give money because they'll get ground down. And ultimately, and this is, we've discussed this in the administration, ultimately, what you can't have here is risk of any kind of nuclear action, even a tactical nuclear action. I mean, even if it's not a big bomb explosion,
doesn't matter.
Just a tactical nuke would take stock markets down all over the world.
Well, they haven't been used in 80 years. They've been used exactly twice in human history.
You can't allow it to happen.
It's not a precedent you want at all.
And while I think we have to get a fair deal for Ukraine, we cannot allow that country to drag us into World War III. And that's not my policy. That's President Trump's policy.
Yeah. Common sense.
Okay. Before you got married, did you ever have a crazy girlfriend who kept doing, the same stupid stuff over and over? I won't make you confess on that front. Okay. So here's Russia looking at the United States. Well, back in the 70s into the 80s, Senator Jackson, and another member of Congress named Vanik, they imposed sanctions on Russia, on the then Soviet Union. Jackson, Vanik. Then those sanctions were lifted. And then in the early 2000s, you had this guy named Browder. His father or grandfather had been sort of the head of the Communist Party in the United States. Tried to overthrow the U.S. government. Anyway, he got mad at Putin, and he got an act pushed through called the Maginski Act. More Russia. Then we get the special military operation of February 2022. And what did we get more of? Come on, Nima, tell me. What did we get more of? It starts with an S. Ends with an S. Sanctions. Right? Yes. We'll make this into like a game show. So, here's Russia, Russian leaders like Putin looking at the United States. We're that crazy girlfriend, okay? Always doing the same thing over and over, and none of it's positive. It's always negative. Sanctions. Oh, we want to be your friend. Sanctions. Oh, we want to be your friend. Sanctions. After a while, that's why you didn't marry that girl, okay? He's like, God, this is a toxic mess. Well, Putin's, that's sort of how Putin's viewing. Even Witkoff's coming, he's bringing flowers and candy. Oh, man, I want to be your date. I want to be your special person. Russia said, "Oh, that's nice. Hey, we like you here. Take this portrait to Donald Trump. We prayed for him when he got shot. We hope God blesses him. But we ain't getting married, okay? Or if we get married, there's going to be a prenup. There's going to be some solid concrete steps in place." And just as Witkoff displayed remarkable, surprising ignorance about the Middle East, about the nature of the Zionist ideology to conquer and take complete control of Gaza and the West Bank, calling it Judea and Samaria. He really, in my view, reflected similar ignorance about Russia and Ukraine. He couldn't even name the four oblasts. He struggled. Yeah, the Donbass, and I don't remember the others. Crimea. Oh, that wasn't Crimea. No, it was, didn't know Zaporizhia, didn't know Kherson, but also doesn't know the history of Russia and Ukraine. doesn't understand that Russia was created essentially when marks its founding in Kiev in like 989 AD, more than 1,000 years ago. So that Ukraine, even on paper, didn't exist as a nation, 110 years ago. It was sort of a creation out of World War I. He doesn't understand that. It's very much like he thinks he's doing a real estate deal. He's trying to sell you a building with a bunch of condos, but he doesn't tell you that the history of that building was used as a brothel, or was used to manufacture deadly chemical. Doesn't give you the history of the building. He just wants to make the deal based upon the immediate issues at hand, and that's what's so dangerous about this. I think Witkoff is well intentioned, but they think that they can bum rush Russia into a deal, and Russia ain't getting bum rushed. And at some point, I think Trump's going to express frustration over that and may revert. Okay, do that. We're going to impose more sanctions. And Putin's already said we're always going to get more sanctions from the West. He said that last week at that conference of industrialists at a closed door meeting, but word leaked out about some of the things he said. He's not naive at all about the United States being an unreliable negotiating partner. We're not reliable. We are very erratic and untrustworthy.
The point that he was talking about Europe and the way that they're trying to talk with Europeans in order to convince them that the way they're behaving in Ukraine is not going to benefit the West.
Yeah.
Do you think that Europeans are getting the lesson or understanding what Witkoff is talking about?
Europe's a hot mess. They're going to try. Let me rephrase. Not they all. Starmer, Macron, Merz are going to do what they can to try to sabotage any U.S.-Russia deal to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. But the problem they have is all three are economic basket cases. They are also military basket cases. And so they don't have the military clout to change the course, and they certainly don't have the economic clout. But still, they're going to try to derail it if they can. We can find some way. If I'm Donald Trump, I think he's actually moving on the right track with saying, "Hey, with NATO, we're no longer going to have a U.S. commander as the supreme allied commander. You guys take it on." It's a way to further distance the United States from being responsible for having to defend Europe. But Europe is divided internally. Starmer, tried to convene this, conference coalition. First, it's called the Coalition of the Willing. Now it's the Coalition of the Voluntary Supporters, or some, idiotic euphemism. And when they got together, man, they couldn't even agree on whether to sit or stand. They were very divided. So this is that's the good news. But still, they're a toxic part of any potential solution to the war in Ukraine.
Larry, are the rumors about Zelensky being interested in having a new presidential election in Ukraine, does it have anything to do with the reality, or is it game on the part of the Europeans?
That's just public spin. He's not keen on new elections because A, he won't get elected, and B, he'll be out. As long as he's sitting in with the chair that he's sitting in, and he gets to have some control, he can enrich himself and make sure that nobody kills him. So no, and in fact, I think a lot that Witkoff has said, "Oh yeah, we're close to a deal." Yeah, Ukraine recognizes they need to have elections. I've seen no evidence of that.
Larry, I do feel that Russia, since Donald Trump was elected in the United States, slowed down a little bit on the battleground to see what would be the policy of the Trump administration. Right now, it seems that they're getting to the point that Donald Trump is not going to do anything that much substantial when it comes to the conflict. They have to decide it on the battlefield. They have to do
No.
something.
No, actually, in fact, instead of cutting back on operations, they've actually, I think, accelerated. So remember, they launched that amazing attack in Sudzha, where the Russian Special Forces soldiers walked 15 kilometers. So that's almost a 10-mile walk, hunched over, because they're walking through a pipe that was like 4 foot high. So they had to bend over, carrying weapons, carrying their gear, and march 10 miles that way to get to collection points where they could come out of the gas pipeline and launch attacks behind lines. They've been making steady advances now in Zaporizhia. They're making advances in Donetsk, around Pokrovsk and Chasiv Yar. So Putin, he's going to continue moving. The war is going to go on. They're not going to stop. Trump wants a ceasefire. Russia's not going to give a ceasefire. The only way they will stop firing is when the conditions that Putin laid out in June of 2024 are met. And there's, the window on that's going to close. And when that closes, Putin is going to lay out new demands that'll be more harsh, more punitive, if you will. And so, this is what the United States needs to do right now is cut off all aid, all intelligence support to Ukraine. Say, okay, you're done. We're not doing this anymore. And Europe is not going to be able to pick up the ball. They can't say, oh yeah, we'll step in and replace what the US was doing. They don't have the resources, either in terms of personnel or finances or industrial capability. That's what it's going to take. In fact, I think from Russia's standpoint, that's what they'd want to see. They'd want to see that before they agree to any kind of ceasefire, because they've again been repeatedly burned. They've entered into ceasefire after ceasefire. They did so in September of 2014 on Minsk 1. Then they did it again in Minsk 2, and in both times the ceasefire was broken by Ukraine.
Are Ukrainians afraid of losing Odessa at this stage?
They better be, because they're going to lose it. I don't think they're going to hang on. They'll be able to hang on to it. Putin's made it clear he's going to take. If the current deadline, he hasn't really put a specific date on it, but the current offer that he's got on the table, if they don't take that now, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, that's off the table, and he's going to take Odessa and Mykolaiv.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Yeah, you're like a rooster crowing in the morning. I wake up with Nima and get the week started right. All right, my friend. You have a good. You behave yourself. You keep bringing on interesting people to talk, and we'll talk again on Friday. All right.
Talk to you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Take care, Larry. Bye-bye.